this is Rafi Cruzon, and you are tuned in to Nothing But That Sports Talk. Welcome to another episode of Nothing But That Sports Talk. I'm Rafi Cruzon, and your eyes do not deceive you. I promise you, your YouTube and Instagram is not broken. We got Fox 5 anchor and former MSG Network sideline reporter Tina Cervasio on the show.
I would have done more makeup if I knew I was going to be on YouTube. Sorry.
But yeah, nonetheless, welcome aboard. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on Nothing But That Sports Talk.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It was good to run into you a couple weeks ago, and really appreciate it. We go way back.
Yeah, just like literally way back. All it took was just taking a picture. But nonetheless, why don't you give me a little bit about how your journalism journey got started?
How I got started. Oh gosh. Do you have 25 years? I'm just kind of trying to light things up better here.
Make it as short as sweet as possible.
Well, I just always loved sports. I mean, I tried to be, I tried all the sports. I tried basketball and soccer and softball, really found my best way in the individual sports that did not involve balls, which was gymnastics and track and field. So, but I always loved going to games. My family, they were all educators, which also meant they were also coaches in everything in high school and in college. So a lot of my mother's cousins, a lot of my aunts and uncles were all coaches. So over the growing up as a little girl, I would just go to games with my parents. Go see Uncle John's football games on Friday night at Belleville High School, and go see Uncle Joe's freshman football team on Saturday mornings. And in the spring, we would go to cousin Carl's softball games or cousin Jimmy's women's girls basketball or whatever. So that was like a big family outing, constantly going to see sports. And then my dad's father, my grandfather, was a big Giants fan. So just our whole life was just about watching sports. And so it was like a second language to me, so to speak. And then when I was in college and I realized I always wanted to be a journalist, always wanted to be a broadcaster, loved Barbara Walters, watching her interview shows. But I also loved when she interviewed athletes, like to see her interview Shaquille O'Neal or like Joe Montana. And I loved those interviews because I love sports. So to see a news person do that, then when I was in college, it wasn't about the news person. It was about women covering sports. I was first introduced to Gail Gardner through my dad when I was a little girl. He told me to watch this woman. She's one of the hosts on an NFL pregame show. My dad also turned me to Susan Waldman, listen to WFAN radio. There's a woman doing updates and hosting shows and covering the Knicks. She used to do Knicks pregame on WFAN radio. And then I would see Hannah Storm and Linda Cohn and Michelle Tafoya, Leslie Visser, all on TV when I was in college, whether it was Monday Night Football or ESPN Sports Center. And I was like, okay, I'm going to college to be a journalist, but now I know I want to be a sports broadcast journalist. So that just opened the floodgates and just kind of put my blinders on from there.
That's pretty amazing that you managed to know these big names, even like when you was like up and coming during your college days. It's like when you see all these big names on television a lot, like how did that like motivate you to become the journalist that you are today?
Just seeing the excellence that they brought to the television broadcast. And I never saw them. I mean, of course, it was very unique at the time to see women covering men's sports, like having Leslie Visser on the sidelines of the NFL. That made it very unique. At the time, Hannah Storm was she was a pregame host for the NBA Today on NBC. Now we don't flinch. Malika Andrews and all these, you'll have a whole panel of women. So we don't flinch. We're used to it. But oh my God, 30 years ago, it was very different and it stood out. But to me, it wasn't like a woman's doing it different. To me, it was like that person is excellent at what they are doing. I want to do that field and I want to have that level of excellence like them. And that's what motivated me, both from, I guess, an educational level too, to study hard at school. I studied journalism and did all my things there. And then just slowly, everybody's got a different journey, everybody has a different path. But I slowly had to work my way up the ladder to get jobs and get to certain places and get to be on certain stations and whatnot. And I'll be honest, a lot of my goals, I haven't reached them yet. So there's still a lot to be done.
Yeah, I mean, well, we all know for sure that we have a lot of room for improvement when doing hosting and reporting in the sports media space, and And I've got like I remember when I first started watching you, you was a sound reporter for MSG Networks, covered the Knicks. I mean, you probably, I mean, obviously you do it for Fox as well, but you actually like managed both of those jobs back in like 2000s, early 2010s. Like, why don't you tell me
Yeah.
about the struggles and day-to-day life of working for two different networks and covered the New York Knicks during that time?
So I
During the
was
days of
full time. Yeah. So I was
during
full
the days
time
of
at MSG.
Marbury. You know what I'm talking about, like, during the days of Marbury and up until the days of Camille Anthony.
So with Marbury, I only got to cover him when I was actually freelance at CBS 2. So I got to cover a little bit of the Marbury era when I was at CBS 2. Then I left New York and I went to Boston for 2 years, from 2006 to 2008. I was in Boston at NESN, New England Sports Network, where I was the Boston Red Sox reporter. And I know your New York fans cringe, but hey, it was a job. And that's some of the sacrifices you have to make when you cover sports. It doesn't matter where you're from or who you root for. You might get a job in a rival market. And Boston is a beautiful city. And
Very beautiful city. I went there. I actually went there when I was a teenager during 2008. That was a very
mhm.
nice city. The
Yeah,
fan
that
base
was
is
right after I
strong.
left. Oh wow.
The fan base is strong. They really did.
Oh,
They like. I remember like I remember when I told this one guy that was planning to buy tickets to a Red Sox game. I believe it was against the New York Yankees at Fenway Park. Let's be honest, the big green monster didn't look as big when seen in real life, but he even said that wow, you coming from New York, really?
yep, yep. So I mean, it's that's what I loved about working in Boston because it was such a small city and they had one team per sport, not like New York where there's two, three teams per sport, I mean, professionally. And they had their, two main colleges, but their big college was Boston College. And of course you have Harvard, Ivy League athletics, BU. But I mean, they eat, breathe, live, sleep, bathe in Red Sox. And then come like the Celtics and the Patriots and the Bruins. And they were all winning championships when I was there. So it was just an incredible experience to be there during their big three era. So I was covering the Red Sox, which won the World Series in '07. At the same time, right after that, that's when the Patriots had
They lost
won.
to the New York
Lost
Giants.
to the Giants. And I was a Giants fan, like, go Giants, beat the undefeated Patriots.
Yes.
But I was there for the undefeated season. And then the Celtics win and then the Bruins won. So it was just an incredible era to be covering sports in Boston. So then in 2008 though, I got an offer out of nowhere from MSG Network. And of course I want to go home. I was born and raised in New Jersey, 11 miles to the Lincoln Tunnel, 5 miles from Giant Stadium, and then eventually it became MetLife Stadium. But that's how I grew up, with Giant Stadium right there. So of course I was going to go back to MSG Network, the station that I watched growing up, and watched my Knicks. I was a big Knicks fan. I would go to Nets games because they were easier to get tickets at Brendan Arena and Continental Airlines Arena, but I would go to the Nets games to see the Knicks. So I was a Knicks fan, Ewing era, the little girl. And then of course we got up into the 90s and with Houston and Starks and oh gosh, Anthony Mason and good times. But so let's see. So I came back to MSG in 2008. So I came back to New York rather, MSG in 2008. And then a year later is when I started freelancing at Channel 5. So I would, because I wasn't really anchoring that much at MSG. I was sideline reporter for the Knicks, sideline reporter for the New
New
York
York
Red Bulls, and
Rangers.
then I would host
Right.
pregame and halftime. But that was like no teleprompter. That was just hosting and introducing packages and talking with analysts. But I wanted to keep my anchoring sharp, and I was able to get a fill-in job at Fox 5. And that was great because it's a totally different area, because you're working at a news station. It's not a sports station. You are a news person that specializes in sports. And I was writing to anchor 2 3-minute segments. So I'm really glad that I did that freelancing and worked the two jobs at the same time, because then I was able to get a full-time job at Fox 5 and eventually host their sports show. So, but that was a great era at MSG, in a sense that I started when Donnie Walsh had just taken over as the president and GM, and then he hired Mike D'Antoni. And, there were high hopes. And then right after that, Amari Stoudemire came and said the Knicks are back. And they did have relevance. They did with Amari, and they made the playoffs. Didn't last long. But then came along Carmelo Anthony. So it was kind of like trying to get back. They had their own big three with Tyson Chandler added in there. And I was there for the 2012-13 season, which that team, if it
That was
wasn't,
phenomenal.
injuries,
Incredible year.
they should have got to the finals. I'm not going to say they would win the championship, but or at least the Eastern Conference Finals, because that, that's the LeBron Miami era. But my goodness, that was such a good team. But when you flip on a switch, the light switch was just shut off. I mean, within a 3 game span, well, you had lost Kurt Thomas because he broke his foot getting the Knicks into the postseason in an incredible game in Utah, which started off a whole win streak. Then you lost Tyson Chandler, his neck injury flared up, and Jason Kidd, who was a warrior, he didn't tell anybody, but he was dealing with back issues. So he was playing incredibly injured. Uh, Everybody was dealing with injuries. Steve Novak, J.R. Smith, who was 6th man of the
Even
year.
Rasheed Wallace is dealing with injury. That was his final, and I believe
He
that
was older too. Yeah,
I
that
believe
was
that was
the
like
whole
the tail end of
age.
his career. But he was
And
the
the
reason for the
thing
Knicks'
was,
strong start. But he was the
remember,
reason
Ricky?
for the Knicks' strong start.
Oh my gosh. And then remember who were Carmelo and Amari were playing great, but that was it. They were finally playing
Yeah, the size of Roy Hibbert
great.
was
They
just
were
way too
healthy,
much.
but it's 2 guys against 5 can't happen. Oh, so
Yeah,
anyway,
the size of Roy Hibbert was just way too much for Amari and
and Carmelo to do on their own.
and
And
Melo
everybody
who
wants to
were
talk
facing
about
the
the
Indiana
block
Pacers.
on Carmelo. What's his name? He's an analyst now.
Yeah, come
Oh my
on,
God,
I think he has his own
check.
podcast, 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. Brooklyn, whatever.
Yeah, but in any event, I mean, that was just too bad. That whole Pacers series, it was just unfortunate what happened to the Knicks day. But it was great. And to cover Carmelo's 62-point game, when Joel Embiid had his big game the other night and Karl Anthony Towns, it just, got real reminiscent. It made me remember that Carmelo 62 game at the Garden. But to see the Knicks fans chant for Jalen Brunson just last night, the night before we're speaking here, it reminded me of those days with Melo and the MVP chants and how emotional it is for them. So that was really cool to see.
Exactly. I never forget that era. That was back when the Knicks weren't always running up and walking up and down 34th Street celebrating every single playoff win they get, every single playoff game they get during last season, and then a few seasons before when they surprised me by making the playoffs in 2021 after going through that long drought on the way towards the end of Melo and the beginning of like the Julius Randle era. Right.
Yes.
Now we're talking about Jalen Brunson possibly at least being the conversation for MVP. And then later this year, you're gonna continue to see fans walk up and down Manhattan, celebrating, chanting, "Bing bong." When you were coming to the Knicks for MSG, you wasn't seeing too much of that in the playoff wins. You wasn't seeing too much of that, and they had a drought playoff drought that lasted 7 years up until Murray went there.
Yeah.
And you got to cover like many major important stories from Carmelo Anthony playing his first home game as a Knick to LeBron James' decision the year before that. And I know that upset a lot of Knicks fans. And then of course, the year I met you, I took the photo with you wearing this jacket. You witnessed the Knicks drafted Kristaps Porzingis that everybody booed, and we all booed him until he showed you how good he was.
I know. And then that kind of fell apart on the Knicks. But don't forget Linsanity.
Oh yeah, that story. So you got to cover. So I got to see you doing sideline reporting and interviewing all those players and covered all those stories. I remember you interviewing Nate Robinson after every victory he gets. Yes. You say shake and bake all the time. I remember that. I witnessed it as a teenager.
That was still like the transition period because they really just couldn't get over the hump too much. Get past that first round of the playoffs with D'Antoni. But man, Nate was just so fun to watch. He defied all odds. So that was a
dunk contest. He was winning dunk contest for the Knicks though. You can't forget that.
Yeah. Right. And remember when
no, I'm not 3
Howard,
times.
It's just wild.
Actually 3 times. He won in 06. Well, he lost in 2007 against. He lost in 2007. I believe it was against Gerald Green for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and then he won the other 2 times. One in Vegas, the other in Dallas. Yeah.
Yep. Nate
those
was
are good times for the New York Knicks. You got to interview these players and cover it all.
I mean, there weren't, it just for a Knicks era, there were some bad lost seasons, but there's still like, when you have those moments when somebody has a great game or a triple double or a double double, and David Lee had some great games and he was an all-star for the Knicks at that time. And, because him and Nate were a great pick and roll, combination there for a bit. And, so that was, that's why it made that 54-win season 12-13 was just so amazing. And then they had the drought after that. And then you're right, it's the Julius Randle era. And to add Brunson in that mix, they've got a really unique roster right now. And I
9-game
love
winning streak.
seeing
Jalen
Brunson
Brunson,
start.
Jalen Brunson carried the Knicks all the way into the top three of the Eastern Conference. They're already talking about how far they're going to go. They could go in conference finals or NBA finals, but let's just hope they exceed expectations this time.
I mean, the fact that they were down by 11 points. I was at an event, and I was in an event with a lot of Knicks fans. It was a NFL Giants event with Carl
Yeah, I
Banks,
was going to ask you about that.
Super Bowl stuff and Super Bowl clothes. And, we're all watching our Knicks. I'm watching the score, who's got the video on. And they were down 11. We're like, another game without OG. But, they're not gonna win 55 straight with Randall and OG out. And they come back and win. I couldn't believe it when I was in the car listening on the radio. So anyway, it's exciting. It's a great time.
Yeah, but now we get to this point. Like, how different is it covering the New York Knicks right now as a Fox 5 anchor compared to back then when you was doing it for like two different networks?
Good question, because my schedule does not permit me to go to games. I get up 3 a.m. because I anchor between 6 and 10 in the morning. So our anchor show on Fox 5 is Good Day New York. It's not like the 5 o'clock news. I mean, the 5 o'clock news and 6 o'clock, those are all important. But the big show that draws the names and the celebrities and blah, blah, blah is Good Day New York. It's the only local news show in the morning that goes like the prime morning hours, which is 7 to 10. The other locals go to the national show. So we are all New York all the time from 7 a.m. till 10 a.m. And we would do national stories. I mean, I'm going to do stories about the Super Bowl, but to have, local figures on. So for the Knicks, I mean, I don't get to go to a lot of games. I had been trying to get Brunson and Julius before during the All-Star voting. And then they had like a little losing streak, and then Jalen was out for a game with his calf injury, and had all these interviews set up for like the next day at practice. And it just wasn't working out, and then one day they canceled practice. I was like, oh my God, I was supposed to interview them today. And they canceled practice because, injuries and all kinds of stuff. So it's really different. And I miss being a team reporter because when I was in Boston, I was the Red Sox reporter. For 7 solid years, I was the Knicks reporter. And then 10 years, I was the Red Bulls reporter. So I do miss that because you build great relationships and you get to do such in-depth stories and you get
You get
such
to work
great.
with Mike Green, and you get to work with Gus Johnson when he was
Yeah.
even though
That's
he's
different
back,
now.
even
That's
though he's
different.
kind of back with MSG now, but he wasn't. He was doing more games for MSG Networks during your time there than he does right now.
Who's that?
Gus Johnson.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Because Gus was there when I was, yep, exactly. It's great
Yeah.
to see him back and hear his voice. I'm sorry. I have 2 cats running around like crazy and they're knocking stuff over. That's why I keep looking. So anyway, so it's very different. And while the Knicks are playing, don't forget the Nets. I have to also cover the Nets and the Rangers and the Islanders and the Devils and WNBA Liberty Free Agency and Gotham FC, NWSL free agent signings as well that had a big one a couple of weeks ago. Then our football season ended abruptly, but who are they re-signing? Who's leaving? There's the controversy with what's going on. I have to cover the controversy inside the Jets. And are they, what free agents? Are they going to lose Saquon Barkley, the Giants? Like there's just so many other things I'm covering. And then guess what else happens in February? While everyone's going to be cheering on Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson in the All-Star game, I'm at spring training. So I don't even get to watch the All-Star game because I'm running around Mets or Yankees camp because, it's spring training is nuts. You have to cover this one on that field or this one on that field, report all night. I have to write my
You're
stories.
all over the place, Tina. You're really all over the place.
So that's what's different. So that's what I loved about covering a team, but I also love I get to cover every team now, but it's just not as in depth. And I do miss that. So I don't get to know the players as well as I got to know Carmelo and Amari and players like that I keep in touch with and see, and whether it's social media, different players' families that I get to keep in touch with. But I mean, the longer I'm around and doing this job with all the teams, eventually it catches up. I'm getting to know some parents here and there and some wives here and there and different teams and things like that, and some players, as long as they're here, because that's the problem when you're covering all the teams too. The turnover is crazy. So you appreciate when a player's with the team for an extended amount of time, because maybe I only get to interview them 2 or 3 times a year, sometimes once, but then it builds up. and I'm looking forward to seeing the guys that, the Yankees and the Mets. And, now I know Pete Alonso well, and he knows me. We get to do a good sit down at least once a year. Same thing with Garrett Cole. Still trying to sit down with Aaron Judge, but he knows me. I'm always at his locker when I'm at Yankees games, saying hi, doing quick interviews with the whole group. But it's a slow build with these relationships, because I'm not there a lot, and I'm always reintroducing myself, always, just in case because there's a lot of reporters, just in case they forget who I am. Forget Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle have no idea who I am, because I never get to go, and that's kind of the challenge. The Knicks and Nets right now, because they've had a lot of turnover the last few years, and COVID. So, but hopefully now with this being a playoff team, a great story, I'll be able to get to, a couple more practices and things like that before the playoffs start.
Yeah, but I mean, even when you don't get to do it for the Knicks, I mean, like you mentioned, you got to do it for the OTs. I mean, I watched him interview Bernard Delaney during the 2021 New York Liberty season that year, where they lost
Yeah.
to Phoenix Mercury, and of course I saw you with the WNBA Finals. And as we transition to that, like, won't you tell me about the whole experience of being able to cover the New York Liberty and witnessing them get to the finals last year against the Aces, and what was arguably one of the most talked about matchups that was set in stone since last year's off season.
Yes, and I mean, just in sports in general, across the global aspect, the way that the ratings went up to watch the Liberty play the Aces in this year's WNBA Finals was phenomenal. I mean, what a team. They put together a super team. You've got to give them credit for doing that. And they followed through. They made it to the finals, but then they faced another super team. What I mean, that's that's what, and a super coach. Think about it. She came from the NBA. So I mean, when I talked to Brianna Stewart a lot during the playoffs, and when they made the finals, just what a great interview. And you see why she's a great player, because she's a great person and a great leader, and so focused. But there's also an energy to her. It's not like she's got the blinders on and it's all about basketball. It's about team, making everybody better around me. That was her first year with the Liberty. And it took them a little while to get going and to all be able to play together when you have, Sabrina and Brianna Stewart and JJ, Jonquel Jones. And she's another one. They're just such phenomenal people when you get to interview them. And just the complexity of how they see the game and things like that. That's what I love about women's basketball. It's they talk about it more like a chess match, and then they back it up with just phenomenal skills and athleticism. I mean, to see the way Sabrina Ionescu plays guard, and the speed and her, her vision, and then the Brianna, like just I mean, the way that she moves, her footwork and the athleticism on the court. And Jonquel, man, she defensively, I mean, and then she'll come up and, score 28, the next game. So it's just the way she plays both sides of the court. But yeah, that was exciting. I think women's sports in New York rules. Gotham FC wins the NWSL championship. And
And
now
then you
next,
finally have like a PWHL hockey team playing in UBS Arena.
yes,
That's
yes,
another
and to
that's another
play in
point
that
that you have to
big
put
NHL
in.
arena, yeah. So that, I mean, there's been a lot of changes in women's hockey. We covered the Riveters last year. That was the local New York, New Jersey team. They were the Metropolitan Riveters playing at American Dream in New Jersey. We covered games there at the rink. Now it's a new league. A lot of the same Riveter players moved over to there. It's great. There are a lot of athletes to cover, but that was really exciting to see that happen in the WNBA with the Liberty, and to see Gotham FC win the soccer championship. That was
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, that was awesome, man. Like a few more topics before I let you go, and I understand that because I understand you got something coming up, but let me just get. You mentioned your love for women in sports and you building the network and having these relationships. All that carries you into being one of the hosts of We Need to Talk. I mean, like, what did you? I mean, I've seen a lot of interviews for We Need to Talk. We work with people like Lisa Leslie and Sarah Kustok. How important has We Need to Talk been important to sports media from your own perspective?
It was the first ever national sports show created by women, produced by women. So there's a female producer, female executive producer, female director, and hosted all by women. Now, over the years, we've had men step in and produce and direct and co-host or come on as our guest hosts, like Aaron Taylor, who is a big star, of course, analyst with their college football coverage on CBS. I've got to do a couple shows with him. And we have male guests, obviously. It's not just about female sports, it's just women running the show. And I like how it's kind of not so much about that anymore, because that was 10 years ago how it started. So it was unique. Now you have major pregame shows for the NBA on ESPN, hosted and analyzed by women. Yes Network often has almost all women on their broadcast doing Nets games. Vianney was the analyst on the desk the other day. Of course, you've always got Sarah Kustok doing the games. I forget who called that particular game. It was either Ryan or Ian Eagle. But then Nancy Newman was the host. So it was just Ian or Ryan. I forget who was calling the game. That was the only male on the broadcast that day. And they just went on the air. It was not a big deal. And that's how we need talk has become. We just cover sports. It's an hour show once a month. It's a special in-depth interviews, unique storylines, and of course with women, we're able to bring our own contacts and cover women's sports, Olympians, executives. Swin Cash, one of our hosts, has now become one of the top female executives in the NBA, executive vice president of basketball operations for the New Orleans Pelicans. So that's great. I mean, Lisa Leslie is a businesswoman and just, I mean,
And
Mount
she's
Rushmore.
also a coach and Big Three. She's also a coach
She's
Big Three,
everything.
and she's hosting too. Lisa,
Yes,
no joke.
big three job. She is a businesswoman with a huge real estate company, and she's also does all the on-air stuff for We Need to Talk. So and she's on the Mount Rushmore of female in sports. I mean, you could consider her that. I mean, definitely for women's basketball. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, exactly.
But I think she would be. I mean, she's between her, it'd be tough to pick her or Sue Bird if it came down to the Mount Rushmore. But then you're getting players like Brianna. Like it's made the generations, the way they're turning over the phenomenal athletes coming through in women's basketball. But to work with women like Lisa and Swin Cash and Summer Sanders and Dara Torres, these are all women I cheered for. And because of the way they played and the way they succeeded in sports, that's why I was such a sports fan. And as a journalist, wanted to cover them. So it's such an honor to work with them. That just absolutely blows me away. And then you have some of the best journalists ever. Again, Hall of Famers, Leslie Visser, Hall of Famer, Andrea Kramer. And I get to work with Sarah Kustok and Tracy Wolfson and Jenny Dell and AJ Ross. There's just so many great talented women on that show. We rotate, which is super fun. So we kind of like Aditi Akinbagwa. We never know, who we're going to be assigned with. I don't even know. I'm doing the show in March. I don't even know who my co-hosts are. I think it's AJ. I don't know if it's Sarah. I think it's Aditi, but in any event, so it's great to work with that team. We're like team. We're a team. We cheer for each other. We can't wait to watch the next show to see who they have on. So it's a great day when we get to put that together once a month.
You're one of the most hardworking women broadcasters. Excuse me. You're one of the most hardworking talent in women in sports or in sports overall, Tina. That's all I'm going to pretty much say about that. And the reason why I mentioned that because not only get to cover those many different stories you just mentioned, you also got your own segment, Sports Extra, that you have on Sunday nights, where you interview, where you're doing in stories that not many people like focus on, including the Columbia women's basketball team like weeks ago. I managed to watch them hold off the Villanova Wildcats. So yeah,
women's basketball, and they beat Dartmouth. They beat Penn recently. They're trying to win that championship. I mean, they won the Ivy League regular season last year, but they lost in the tournament.
The tournament,
win the Ivy League regular, win the Ivy League tournament, and get to the NCAA.
You only need to win 2 tournament. You only need to win out the rest of the regular season and win 2 tournament games in order to get to March Madness.
I know they deserved it last year, but it's tough in the Ivies. They're not going to take 2 teams.
Yeah, but why don't you talk a little bit about being able to do that Sports Extra segment, including the women's basketball team from Columbia?
Oh yeah, I mean that's the main part of my job at Fox 5. I mean that's the priority. Sports Extra, Sunday nights 10:30 on Channel 5 here in New York from 10:30 to 11 o'clock p.m. That's my number one priority. And then it's Good Day New York after that, because then I do a lot of my segments that either lead us to Sports Extra, or like this past week, I had Rick Pitino on Sports Extra, and then I added some of the segments that didn't make air to Good Day New York. So we get to see everything that I'm doing on all the different shows, because it's all different audiences. But Sports Extra is a dedicated sports audience. Some people have been watching for 50 years since Bill Mazer created the show. And the late Bill Mazer created that show before there was ESPN Sports Center, before there was any kind of format that we see on TV each night. any wrap-up show that we see on New York sports on SNY. Bill Mazer created Sports Extra, and that was the only way people would get their NFL scores on Sunday night. Or they would have to wait till the Monday morning paper. And sometimes the later games maybe don't even make the West Coast games, don't even make their scores in the paper, because we're talking a little bit, way back in the day. And he created that, and he would go through the scores, and then he would have all the interviews of the local coaches in New York. And he would interview them, whether it was in studio or he would get them after games. And we used a little clip of Rick Pitino in 1987 when he was coach of the Knicks with Bill Mazer. We used that clip the other day. And it led to my interview with Rick Pitino as head coach of St. John's. All these
That was a good interview you did, by the way. Rick Pitino threw his insight how he's motivated to coach St. John's back into the tournament, because St. John's only had about like 2 or 3 tournament appearances in the last 15 years. It's tough making it.
It's tough as the Big East team because there's so many good teams. And that's what he was saying, So, but yeah, a couple weeks ago, I've had my eye on Abby Shue since last year.
Abby Shue's a phenomenal shooter.
3 years ago, yeah. I mean, I think it's 15 times now she's been named. Well, not 15, maybe 11. Ivy League Player of the Week. The woman is shooting like 67% from three. It might even be 83% because it's already changed. She's going to get the scoring record for Columbia ever. She's leading scoring scoring. So she's leading scoring, obviously, in the Ivy League. And she trails only Caitlin Clark in all of NCAA women's basketball active players in shooting percentage. She's just trails, and that's career. Like, so as their career in the 4 years they're active, she trails her by like hundreds of a point in their accuracy and their shooting percentage. So she is a talent. She's been through a lot. She's had a lot of tragedy in her life. Her father passed away during COVID, and she's a survivor of the Parkland high school shooting. She had to transfer schools. She was a junior when that happened, and she went to another high school her senior year, but it did lead her eventually to Columbia. And she's going to be a phenomenal person. She's going to be a pro. She is a WNBA draft prospect next summer. So that's super exciting to see her come to Columbia.
Without question. Imagine her coming from Columbia to the WNBA. That's amazing. And you want to know what else is amazing as you wrap up the show? I mean, we got to get at least a bit in depth on Stephan Curry versus Sabrina Ionescu. I have my bias towards the New York Liberty, but you got it. Do you see Sabrina Ionescu beating Stephan Curry in a 1-on-1 3-point challenge?
You know what? To me, because she is going to use her WNBA ball and shoot from the WNBA line. I know a lot of, and she wants to shoot from the NBA line. I get it, but I feel like, it's a game, right? It's a head-to-head competition. It's a challenge. So when the Lakers play the Knicks tomorrow night, it's that one game. Who's going to win on that night? So what are the advantages? The Knicks are home. They're on a winning streak. Will LeBron play? That's an advantage, obviously, for the Lakers. It's the same thing. It's a strategy. Are they going to hit the three-pointers in their own capacity in that moment? To me, it's not male-female. It's competitor against competitor. Who's ready for that moment? And some people, there's a lot of argument about the playing field. They should be shooting from the same thing to make it. But I mean, that's within the rules of their games. So it doesn't bother me. I love it that she wants to shoot from the NBA line. And I think they would still be pretty even if she shot, because she's strong enough. And it's just a matter of, are you in the game? Are you accurate that night? Do you have your stroke? Do you have your timing? It's not a game situation. It's not in the run of play. So it is different. How do you react under that? Some people think it's easier. Some players think it's not. They'd rather be in the run of play. Stop, pop, and jump, So I think it's great. And I think this will just spark more head-to-heads, more WNBA involvement in NBA skills competitions, I think. And it already did with the skills competition. They have each player from each team. But this, to go head to head, I think this will just spark some new challenges down the road.
Exactly. This could change the whole dynamic of how All-Star breaks for the WNBA and the NBA is going to be later years. I mean, seriously. Mm-hmm. I'm picking Stephan Curry to win it all. And that's my safe bet. I could root for Sabrina Ionescu being the New Yorker that I am, but
I'm just rooting for her. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna.
You can't bet against Stephan Curry. He has the all-time record 3-pointers.
Exactly, but like, will he be thrown off because this is like he's never had a head-to-head against a woman before, and she's Mamba mentality. Kobe trained this woman. You know,
I was
they
just speaking.
that's
I
a
was just
friend.
speaking to Sabrina. Yeah, I was speaking to
Saying.
Sabrina Ionescu
He is
earlier.
Mamba mentality, like lived at their house.
Exactly. You
I don't
know.
know. I feel like there's a little something extra special that has,
This is
transcended
just nothing but
all.
another challenge for Sabrina Ionescu. When I was speaking to her at USA training camp earlier, you'll see that interview published later. And she was talking about she always looked up to Stephen Curry ever since she was about 10 years old.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I
So
mean,
imagine going from that to going to actually do the 3-point challenge against him 1-on-1.
that's so cool.
You can't write a better story than that.
And so that could be Steph's little disadvantage. I mean, she learned how to shoot like him. So, it's right. You get what's this right style? What's the right stroke? What's the right technique? Does that fit me? Did the way Ray Allen shot 3-pointers, does that fit in my body, my mechanics? Or the way Kobe Bryant shot the jump shot? Did she get things from him? So I don't know. It's gonna be really neat. It's awesome. Of course, I'm rooting for her though. She's our New Yorker. She's Liberty.
Just remember what I said about greatest shooter of all time is Stephen Curry. Just
He
remember that.
is. He is. But unique. It's a competition. It's one challenge. It's not a career. We're not doing
I know. But I gotta get out of my biasness this one time. But yeah, that was this episode. Nothing but that sports star. Thank you for stopping by, Tina Cervasio. And I love the fact that you finally made the time to come on my show and we get to connect a little bit more. And hopefully we get more shows like this down the road as we continue to excel in what we do in sports media.
Sounds great. You are doing a great job. It's really awesome to see you, Rafik, and everything that you're doing.
And yeah, for Tia Cervasio, Rafiq Lou is on. We'll see you next time.